Hello, this is Lisa LaRose here on Connect to Love on PRN-FM, and I'm joined by the incredible Michael J. Russ, who is in a little bit of a snowstorm last night. I want to say welcome, Michael, and welcome to my weather.
Always, yes. Well, the weather I used to know that I got away from long ago.
It's a surprise.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I had to smile because Michael is always so graceful whenever I come up with an idea. I had a dream the other day, and I woke up thinking about the true north and what it means to find your true north, and then I got some confirmations, and never dreaming that the north, as in the true North Pole, would visit Florida. It was like I was thinking about that with a big smile on my face. I gotta be careful what I come up with topics. Yep. I'm sending the northern cold down to the south. We're gonna have to find the true south.
You better watch it. I can't play golf when I can't see the course because of 3 or 4 or 5 inches of snow. It was quite beautiful though, just when it started, and then it just kept going, and before you know it, there's 5, 6 inches on the ground. Yeah, quite an experience, but it was, it's just surreal, and you're just looking at it going, where am I again? What's my latitude and longitude? I said, this is the first time since 1989, 89, right, that they've had snow here, and in North Florida, and New Orleans, and Mobile, and they closed 65 miles of I-10.
That's
closed 65
wild.
miles of I-10, last night through this morning. Yeah, because of the danger. There was some trucks were stuck.
It probably saved some lives. What a blessing, right?
Of course, always. Yeah.
Keeping people
Can't look at that as a bad thing ever. It's just something that happens. But it was a cool night. It got down to 12, I think, 12 wind chill last night, which is pretty cold for us. And the snow is still out there on top of the tarp that I've covered my tropicals with, my tropical plants, bird of paradise and other things. I found a way to cover them. Now let's see, make sure that just because snow couldn't collect on them, that doesn't mean that they didn't get impacted underneath there. Whatever. They'll grow back. They're hardy and they're bulbous. So when they die to the ground, they come right back. It just takes them a couple of years to get to the height that they are now. But that's just the way it goes. You can't save everything. You just do your best.
Well, you do your best. And it was between -7 and 9, and I found myself driving north last night to get some straw for the feral cat community because I just thought, oh my goodness, I see these cats, and I had some Rubbermaid containers, and so what was I doing at 12:30 last night? Filling up these containers and putting them out. And I think when I was putting them out, it was 1 degree, but I drove around the block, and they were already starting to go into the containers and the boxes in the area that I filled with straw. So
cool.
It was well worth it. Yeah, it was well worth it because I felt so bad for them, and I thought, geez, I can bring in the ones that I can handle, and there's just this one community. And so it didn't snow. It was just very, very cold. So at least they'll have shelter for a little while, and it's going to warm up, and it'll be spring before we know it.
Yeah, of course. That's awesome. That is absolutely amazing. Yeah, give them a little bit of reprieve from the attempts made to get some body heat going and amongst each other and do it. My cat, by the way, did not want to go outside. Hasn't wanted to go outside.
Sure.
Yeah, she took one look at. I think she's 2 feet away from the door going, hey, that's a little cold out there. It's breezy, too, blustery. I think I'm not going to go out. And that's pretty much it. So she hasn't been out, and you know that she's not going to go out and stick her paw in the snow or on anything else. So she's been inside resting and hanging out, being lazy like she always is. She's a cat. And
she's following her true north, Michael. She's following her true north.
Following her own true north, which is generally a lazy track, all day long, lying around, nocturnal, night going around, doing whatever she's doing. Yeah, but, there's nothing to chase because all of the lizards are hiding out, too, because,
Oh, I would imagine, for sure.
Cold. Yeah, so the little geckos she chases around, they're not hanging out. So it's just why bother? Why bother going outside to just freeze? But I love it. I love the idea of today's show, True North, authentic you. They kind of let our audience know what you mean by True North. Let's define that.
Yeah, sometimes what happens with me is that something will pop into my head, and then my mind will wander. And my wandering mind, I think, is part of my journey, that it will lead me into a direction. And I was speaking to a friend of mine today, and I was telling her about the topic for the show, and she said to me right out of the blue, not all who wander are lost. And I thought, Carrie, thank you very much. That is so fitting for what we're speaking about, because my mind does wander. And it's interesting. I am very challenged directionally. And I used to say I had no sense of direction. And then I thought, no, I don't want to speak that into being. I live in a city where nothing is built on a grid. We have 3 rivers, and our city comes to a triangle. So there are streets that don't even make sense. And it's very easy to get lost. And so I didn't really like the languaging of that I had no sense of direction. So I started to change it and say that I was geographically challenged. And so when I think about this concept of finding your true north, for me, it's all about the idea of the direction that aligns with my soul's deepest dreams and desires, and really navigating it and sticking to what my truth is, the truth about who I am and what my values are. And I ask myself those questions because a lot of times it's sort of like being in a movie. We'll be going one direction, and all of a sudden this huge plot twist comes around, and it completely takes us from a place that we thought that we were going to go or be heading. And being able to bring yourself back to your center, to your authentic self, and say, what is right for me? What is true for me? What is what I really desire? And just anchoring yourself in and allowing that to be your point of action in regard to whatever that plot twist was. I'd be curious, Michael, for you, what does finding your true north mean to you?
It's funny, I was just thinking about that. I used to tell people long ago, I used to ask them actually, people that I'd come across, this, what's your life philosophy? You have to draw a line at what you will and won't do when it comes to life. Will you hurt somebody on purpose? Will you hurt somebody physically? What will you not do? Okay, what's the line that you will not cross? And you can figure out what that is, a morals and ethics line. But a philosophy of life, you love yourself, you love others, you love pets, you love whatever, every living thing, or you just, you got to have something. So a lot of young people don't have their own individual philosophy of life, their own true north, because they haven't had enough contrast, in my view, to discover what they will and won't do, or to test their the morals and ethics that they've developed up to a certain point in time. And, there are lots of influences out there. Your parents are an influence, obviously. Brothers and sisters are an influence. Relatives are an influence. Friends, peers, they're influences. And people nowadays young people are very influenced by celebrity, by, rappers and basketball players and actors and singers and, stage and screen and all of that. People who are in the limelight and do quite well for themselves, television actors, movie actors, whatever. Because in my view, our society doesn't really help you discern who you are, what you're good at, what your talents and gifts and skills are. And so I like the idea of authenticity, being authentic, and to me it's being, and what falls in line with this, of course, is truthfulness. Will you be truthful? Will you be honest to yourself and others? Because that's a big thing. You can grow up telling white lies all over the place because it doesn't really do anything. When I learned about 35 years ago that in every aspect there are, white lies can come back and bite you in the behind just like any other. So, and there's a certain energy, a certain stress level that you develop and live with when you don't tell the truth, when you're not honest with yourself and you're not honest with other people. Not in a non-loving way, not in an aggressive way. Because in my view, you can actually say anything you want to anyone as long as you wrap it in love, empathy, compassion, and kindness, right? You wrap it in that, and you can diplomatically let someone know. There's certain rules. You don't say you this, you that. You could use an example of somebody else. You could let them know how whatever it is that they've done makes you feel initially. Keeping in mind, of course, that nothing anybody says or does can make you feel a certain way unless without your permission. Your express permission, that's sovereignty. So these are things for me that have occurred over the course of time, where I've kind of developed my true north. And to me, it's being honest, it's being diplomatic, it's being loving, it's being joyful, it's leaving people better than you found them, because I understand that a lot of this world out there and the information flow and people, there's a lot of separation. There's a lot of people who are confused by the information that they brought in. They're not fully in touch with who they are as an individual, and that starts with, like I said, I'll go back to it again. Your skills, your gifts, your talents. We all have them. We all have a gift, a talent, a skill that is unique to us, and you can build a solid foundational understanding of yourself when you understand your skill. Mm-hmm. And if you don't understand your skill or your talent or your gift or gifts, you're like, you can be like a sailboat with just a mast and nothing to no sail, and that you can actually grab the rudder, hit the sail left and right, and go and guide yourself. And I found that some of the people that I've come across who are having the most challenge in their life really don't understand themselves. They've never taken the time to understand themselves and to develop some sort of foundational philosophy that allows them to navigate this world. Mm-hmm. I mean, if someone came up to me and said, "Hey, let's go jump off a cliff," I don't care how long I've known them. I don't care if they're celebrity. I don't care if whatever it is, how much I like them, how much I love them. I mean, there's something I'm not going to do. I'm not going to jump off the cliff. If I have a parachute, I might think about it, but that still doesn't mean I'm going to do it, because to me, mm-hmm. That has no value for me. I'm not a guy who has a rush. Who needs a fix of adrenaline, because I know people like that as well, right? And
I'm smiling because I just watched a video of a young man who his friends were all standing around, and he ran forward. He jumped on a mini trampoline and propelled himself off of a cliff into the water, but there was lots of rocks, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not a fear person. However, one miscalculation could have been very deadly, and I thought it's just such a powerful metaphor for what you're speaking about, Michael, because finding your true north is not something that's external. It's not proving yourself externally. It's an internal guide that reflects your uniqueness, your identity, your own purpose, your values, beliefs, your passions, all of those things. They all come together. And living in alignment with that. And I'm so glad that you said that, because being validated externally is not finding your true north.
No,
it's a decision that you have to reflect internally and make those decisions for yourself. And when I read Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, he said there's a voice inside of you that knows what you should do. The more you listen to it, the louder it gets. And in echoing that, I heard, and I think maybe it was Shaman Durek, whose book we're listening to, you and I are both listening to, and he said that when you do a coin toss and you throw the coin up in the air and you have already chosen heads or tails about the decision, and he said as soon as, before that coin even lands, you've already know in your head what you want. You want it to be heads or you want it to be tails. Yeah. And that's what that inner knowing is, and trusting your vibes and that inner sense. I mean, it's that head and heart connection. And I think that sometimes we get away from that. And I thought that's a really good exercise. Like when I am coming to a crossroads, and if I, maybe in my inner compass, I know the answer. I know in my heart, maybe I don't want to face it. And if I were to throw that coin up and wait to see if it lands on heads or tails, but where my thoughts go, because we are so powerful. And when we align ourselves to that true north, I mean, it's always going to point in the direction for our highest and greatest good.
I agree.
Always.
Well said. Yeah, that's true. In knowing what's in align with your highest good is always going to be, unless you're really practiced at listening to yourself and your body and what it's telling you, and more of a master of intuition, it's always going to be one of your greatest challenges, because there's so many different variables to think about that have nothing, that are outside of you, that people bring into the mix. They bring into the mix, what would she say, what would he say, what would happen if I did this, and how does it impact them, and all of this. And I'm thinking, like, you know what? To me, this is why some people stay in relationships way too long, way past any growth that is possible. And I think that, for me, I know for a fact, if I hadn't said goodbye to 2 relationships and been forced to let go of two other ones, starting in the mid-'70s, I would not be where I am today. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you on this show. I don't know what I would be doing, but I know I wouldn't be here, because the circumstances from which brought me to this place and brought you and I together initially with Glenn Brooks wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have been down that trail, running on that track, and so we can all kind of...
And me too. I ended a relationship, and then I found I met a woman, and then together we connected with Glenn Brooks. So absolutely, it's amazing when you say that. It echoes the truth to me. It just
blows your
wow.
mind. It blows your mind. And when you recognizing what your body's telling you, what your higher self is telling you, when it comes to where you go. I was fascinated by this gentleman, I think his name is Darius Wright, and on YouTube, and he's got some really fantastic stuff. He does a lot of out of body things, which is really kind of cool. He has the ability to in his paralyzed state, go into a paralyzed state like you do when you sleep, and leave his body. And what's interesting about it is that there are different tracks, there are different dimensions, there are different things that you can do, different realities that you can access. And I think about this from a perspective of, you look at this one reality that we have, and there's snow on the ground right now. That's a reality. That's nothing I can do anything about. It came, it's there, and you basically deal with it. And the thing about true north, which makes it so interesting, is in the way that we're defining it, is that you still have to allow room for it to continue to evolve. And with the contrast that you expose yourself to, people you meet, circumstances and experiences that you have will further define your true north. And generally thinking of it being like this spot within you, and it's not fully shaped. And I don't even know if by the time you die, if it's fully shaped. I don't even know if that's the purpose behind it. Does it have to be fully shaped? No, it continues to evolve, and you kind of live by it, live through it, live with it, engage life through it, right? And then you one day you're not. And it always, there's like I know you're this way too. One of my defining elements of my true north is a passion for information that can help me be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know people who go through life and that's not even on their radar. It's not on their radar, And my two best friends died before one before he was 60, and the other one right at 60, his 60th birthday. Dropped dead, and I'm like, and I know for a fact that he did not really pay a lot of attention to his health. He would always make up some sort of excuse. I don't have insurance, this or that. And I'm going like, there's no excuse if you don't have any insurance, because there's always opportunities. Even our local nonprofit hospital here has a program for people who don't have insurance and don't have enough money to pay for health care, and you still can get health care, right? So, and I learned long ago that you could, if you were paying cash for a blood test, it's $64. If it's insurance, it's $350. It's like, you walk in and you go, what's the cash price? And they go, oh, it's this. I had 3 colonoscopies I just paid cash for. And then I got one with insurance, and I figured out exactly how much money they really cost, right? Because I walk in the door, and my gastroenterologist says, it's less than $1,000. You could, full thing, but no problem. And I'm going, really? Yeah. She says, just right. The billing gal was so friendly. She was amazing. Knew her business inside and out. She said, oh, look, you're going to write a check to these people for this, and you're going to write a check to those people for that. And if you have a biopsy, it's going to cost you this much. And I said, well, okay, that sounds really reasonable. Let's do it. I'm a higher risk, so I have to have one every 3 to 5 years. But the point is that if you understand, your true north involves a lot of different things. Are you somebody who is like me, where you want to know about things that can help you live a better life, a happier life, a healthier life, a more loving life? Are you a seeker of information that can help you do that? And if that is one of your main focuses, one of your main things that you pay attention to, that you give attention to, then those things will come into your life, people, circumstances, information that can help you do that. Somebody else may just be a total creative, and that's not it. It's the Jim Henson effect, right? Jim Henson, brilliant man in his 40s, has so much creativity, so much inspiration, and doesn't pay attention to a little thing that develops into a big thing, and the next thing you know, he's died from something that was totally preventable, because he was so busy working, he didn't want to take any time to go see a doctor about something simple that became complicated, right? So there's lots of those stories. But to me, it's just, I guess there's different. What I'm saying is that there are different aspects of your true north, of your authenticity, and kind of keeping that in mind, that instead of cubbyholing it as, I'm honest or not, okay, I tell the truth or not. It's not that simple. It's not that black and white. However, feeling comes into this, doesn't it? How you feel.
True. And I think, Michael, everyone can cultivate that awareness. Really,
absolutely.
And it is cultivating it. We speak a lot on this show about creating our own reality, but you master that reality by controlling your thoughts.
Yep.
Love versus fear, joy, choosing whatever it is to your higher calling, and it's really your responsibility. Each person has their own responsibility to stay true to themselves and define what your core values are, reflecting on what matters most. So I heard you say honesty. I know compassion is important to both of us. Freedom, creativity is important to both of us.
Right.
Being of service to others, doing things without needing to be validated is important to both of us. Helping and just offering a smile or a kind word or whatever it is. And then when you define those values, whatever it is to you, you let those guide your priorities and those decisions. And even if, for any of our audience members, sometimes it helps. I know that it's helpful for me to do a simple exercise where I write down the moments in my life when I felt aligned and fulfilled and those things. So what were my values in that moment? When I am at peace, and I heard somebody the other day saying the ability to be a dove of peace, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I want to aspire to. Oh my goodness, it just made a dove, D-O-V-E, like the bird.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it was like, oh my goodness, to be that in this lifetime and to be remembered as being a dove of peace, I thought that would be wonderful. So, and maybe sometimes it's just about listening to your inner voice, being in silent meditation or journaling and just doing a free flow in that quiet space, allowing yourself to connect to your deeper self, and then taking what you find in there and saying, okay, what did I write about? What of these values brings me joy? How do I want to impact others? And I think that's how we start to realize what we want to contribute to this world. And that's how our purpose, and that's how we align our values and assessing what our choices are and what habits reflect on them. And like you, Michael, health is very important to me. And I said to a friend of mine, I said, I'm bringing myself back to basics. Like I have, over the holidays, you indulge in different things. And I'm like, no, you know what? I've got to bring myself back to the place where I know the foods that I'm ingesting make me feel vibrant and healthy and strong and aware and the clarity of thought and all of those things. So I go back to my juices. I go back to some of the food supplements that I like to add in. And it makes a big, big difference. And these small, consistent steps bring me back. Each person will have their own path, but it reinforces what is my true north. Yeah.
It's less I agree with what you said in the beginning. It's not necessarily. It's less a place and more of a feeling, and in the way that you engage. Now, here's something interesting because we haven't mentioned this word specifically, but this concept. But self-love comes into this into play with
very true. Mm-hmm.
To true north. And I was listening to Shaman Durek about his definition of self-love, and he's got some very valid points. One of the main ones being that, you might be a giving person. You might care about other people, be somebody who's like a caregiver and, doing for others. However, you have to be just as giving to yourself. You have to be just as giving to yourself. And you can't neglect yourself for the sake of others, because then that's deriving your satisfaction from something outside of you when you're not feeding your own and nurturing your own soul. And there are some people I've come across that are like that. They forsake themselves and find joy and love outside of themselves, which you and I know, and he was mentioning the same thing, is that it means it makes for a hollow shell of a person when you're not giving yourself. You have to give the love to yourself first, which is what he was saying, and I agree 110%. You have to treat yourself with love, with respect, with compassion, with empathy, and with forgiveness. You have to treat yourself that way before you can be that same way with others. Because if what you're deriving your joy and your love from goes away, then you're left with nothing. If you haven't nurtured your own, you're just left hollow, and without a why in life. Why am I doing this? Why am I? Why don't I do something for myself? I know I'll treat myself to whatever. We'll go to mani-pedis. I treat myself to a round of golf twice in the last month and a half. Just go out and play by myself. I don't need to be with other people, because I know people. I have friends who don't want to play alone. The only time they want to play is when they can play with other people. And I'm going, gosh, you're missing half the fun. The ability to go out there and I might even listen to Shaman Durek while I'm playing, or listen to my favorite music or a book or anything else that is nurturing to my mind while I'm out there playing around, because it's fun, because it helps me remain calm. It reminds me of things because golf is just like life, and I want to be emotionally balanced. And I learned something new. Well, I'll stop for a moment, stop the cart, write something down on my notepad on my phone, going, hey, that's really cool. I like that. And I'd like to share that with somebody, maybe in a podcast or something else. But the self-love concept, I don't think enough people, in my view, people don't treat themselves with the love and respect and kindness and empathy, compassion that they really should. A lot of times beating themselves up for making mistakes and having a failure here and there, instead of seeing it as just a stepping stone to get across the big pond. So I big time self-lover,
No, that's so true. Yeah. It's so true. And Michael, it was interesting. I was looking at a documentary that was made. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm just commenting on the little snippet that I saw, and it was about teens and why they're having some challenges right now. And I think it goes back to not all who wander are lost. And in this particular documentary that they made, they asked teens, what do you want adults to know about what you're going through right now? And what does it mean to be a teenager at this point in time in life? And I thought it was really, really interesting. And I think that when you look at Tolkien's quote, not all who wander are lost, it's a testament to the human spirit and our innate desire to want to explore and learn and grow. And when you're a teenager, it's a tough time because you've left the childhood where it's just been carefree. You don't really have any responsibilities, and you've got this age of adulthood looming ahead of you, where maybe as I remember being a freshman in high school and people saying, well, you got to start going to college. All of these colleges came to visit our high school and decide, where do you want to go to college? I just left 8th grade, and they're asking where I want to go to college. I have 4 years ahead of me, but there was that much pressure and starting, prepare for your SATs and all of the things that as soon as you hit that, I think in 9th grade you're 13 years old. So you've been on the planet for 13 years, and they're asking you to make life decisions.
Right.
So I'm eager to watch this documentary because I think it will, and I don't believe that it was an accident that I saw the preview for it on the day that we were speaking about True North, because it is about, whatever it is at age 13, what seeds are you planting? What do you want your life to look like? And how about just letting it flow? Let it be harmonious. Let it be centered in love. Let it be centered in your values, whatever those are, and defining that. I think it's fantastic. I think, when you're growing at that age, you are defining that. So you're learning about courage. You're learning about freedom because you're starting to get away from your parents. You're learning about growing and what it means to have integrity.
Responsibility to yourself
and
to those people you say things to. And to me, it's like, if you have to be responsible, 100% responsible for what you're thinking, what you're saying, and what you're feeling. A lot of times, we're just I don't know the system in place that helps people think about that. Think about being responsible. When I was 12 years old in 7th grade, I went to home economics. Okay, I took a home economics class. I was the only guy in the class. And it wasn't just because, that's where all the girls were. It was because I had, even at that age, I had the urge to be self-reliant. And that was my way of beginning that trek to self-reliance. And I learned all the skills in that class that I needed to learn to be self-reliant. And they've helped me immensely in my lifetime, and it gave me a confidence, a level of confidence in myself and my ability to thrive that I don't know if I would have had. I know, we had maids where we were. In 7 years of my life, out of 15, the first 7, we had maids. They were doing everything for us, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, making beds. We were living in countries where that was the norm. You had somebody yard man that did the yard. You had, people who drove you places if that's what you wanted. And so I was seeking self-reliance. Something told me within, two things that defined my life up to this particular point. The first one is that, self-reliance. Being able to live by myself, be by myself, take care of myself. Because if you want freedom, you have to also have a couple of things. You've got to be self-reliant, you've got to be self-actualized, and you have to be honest with yourself about what you're capable of doing and what you're not, and what you need to go get further knowledge on, and the like. So for me, that was always going to be something that was going to define me. And the last one I already mentioned earlier, which was, staying ahead of the game when it came to health. I had this, if there was something that I was doing, some habit that I created that was going to down the line lead to some sort of negative outcome with regard to my health, I pretty much stopped doing it. That's why I've never smoked. I've never taken a drug in my life, mainly because I not because I'm some righteous individual, but because I've understood early on that I liked who I was. I loved my state of being. I was enjoying life, and I didn't want to change that. I didn't want to change.
Right.
I didn't want to feel differently than I felt. I felt awesome. I felt great. Even when regardless of whether there was a breakup involved or, there was loss of someone, whatever it may be, I just learned. And I learned to deal with loss by having to leave people every 2 years. So my idea of my and I think you moved around a lot as well. When you
did. I moved almost every year when I was up until 8th grade. I did. We were in one place only just 8 months. So you had all of these friends, and then next thing you know, you were packing up and moving. And,
right.
you did it, and you didn't really even think about it. It
right.
I was very painfully shy, but it allowed me to learn the skill of being an extrovert and carry on a conversation and making new friends and being able to speak to strangers without any trepidation. And I just want to go back just one moment, Michael, because when you talked about you didn't, smoke or do illicit drugs or whatever, and what I think for everybody, and it's not a right versus wrong, because that's sort of like a battle with yourself. Like, is this right? And it's going back to that inner self-direction, being in integrity with yourself. And for you, being integrity with yourself meant, no, that isn't something that I want to do. I don't care who else is doing it. And it would be very tempting, because you were a new kid in a new school, to just go with the flow, and I can get acceptance doing this very easily if I join the crowd. No, you question yourself, and you're like, is this in alignment? And then, for me, it's always like, okay, what lights me up? What brings me joy? I'm like you. I love to treasure hunt, and so before the show, I was sharing with Michael that I love old compasses. Isn't it so interesting? I get this thought in the head about true north, and I've always been fascinated with old compasses, and I had one that I purchased at an event. This woman made these really beautiful necklaces out of old compasses. It's just a tiny little thing, and I thought, oh my gosh, I love it, because I can wear it around my neck and I can look at it, and it's kind of fun to play with and go, okay, where's north? I mean, this is well before GPSs, but there's something really special about them. I don't know if it's the energy of the person who held them or had them, and what were they looking for? What did they navigate through? Like, that's always been fascinating. Not everybody on this planet has been on their own unique journey, and wherever the past takes you, it's like, okay, how do you? The compass always points north. And I think inside of us, we have that truth. What lights me up is my true north. It brings a smile to my face and to my heart.
In essence, yes. Yeah. What makes you feel awesome? What makes you feel amazing? What makes you feel self-confident, fully loved, and loving of yourself? It is a fascinating topic. True north. I mean, as our listeners have found out, there's a lot of different things, different ways that you can approach it, which I think is awesome. However, it in my view, it's a knowing. It's a knowingness. It's paying attention to that inner knowing, and the fact that it always points to the north doesn't mean that you can't go in the other directions. It's just that you have a foundation. Let's put it this way. The word grounding hasn't been used in this conversation. However, for me, getting back to true north, if I've gotten off base a little bit, if I've had outside stimuli impacting my life a little bit too much, my true north involves routines, has always involved routines that get me back, get me grounded again, right? I'll sit down and I'll play the drums for half an hour or an hour, right? I'll pop some popcorn and watch movies till 4 a.m., okay? Interesting movies that are I'm not talking about dramas and shoot-em-ups and killing-em movies. It's just movies that are really, that are uplifting for me, that I enjoy. Or just getting together and playing some cards with friends, or dominoes with friends. Playing golf for me, because it was something I was introduced to at age 8, and by my dad, and it's come to be something that helps ground me, that gives me an opportunity to get back to true north if I've gone east, west, or south for a little bit. And it's just, but I can always tell when I need to stop doing something and get back to basics, like you got back to things that were good for your body and healthy and that makes you feel alive, and it helps you feel one with not only yourself but the universe. And we all have something like that. And if we don't, it's time to figure out what that is, because that can always be a way back, a path back to true north. Okay, that's what my playing drums and playing golf are. They're a path back to true, back to balance. Back to balance, rebalancing myself using my skills again. Or I might go out and do a project, something I've never done before. I go investigate. Maybe I look at a YouTube video or something like that. I'm not trying to build a house or anything, but there's something that I have a little conundrum. I had to figure out a way to cover all my plants before the snow. And I was sitting around, and I go, I've got this 24-foot by 14-foot tarp. I've grommets. It's got grommets. And I went out and measured the plants, and I said, what can I do here? I went to Home Depot, and I said, I bought some hooks. I drilled holes. I put in the hooks on the fence, and I basically created a kind of a lean-to concept for the plant. Yeah, it's like, fun. It comes down to the ground. Yeah, and I had this long 2x4, and I wrapped it up in the thing, and I had a couple of stones, and it's perfect, right? And so it was the perfect way not to smush the plant, but give it the opportunity to thrive in inclement weather. And and I've been living in this house for, my gosh, since 2012, right? And I had never done that before, but it just, all I have to do is just take it off the grommets and fold it back up again, and life is back to normal, and then the hooks can stay in the fence. But the beauty of that is how it makes you feel.
Mm-hmm.
When you engage in things that make you feel alive, feel awesome, feel as though that you had a challenge, you met the challenge, you overcame the challenge, you moved through the challenge, whatever it is, the terminology you want to use. It just makes you feel awesome, instead of getting into victim mode and complaining about how am I going to do this, how am I going to do that, it's so hard, it's so challenging, blah, 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 right? Just go out and just, with a smile, just sit down for a moment and just think about how it can be done, move to something else, and let your inner self, your higher self, let your guides, whatever, give you some intuition, guide you to how you can put it together. To me, that's just fabulous.
Michael, and it's interesting because as you were speaking, I thought, that's part of your true north. Those plants in your garden bring you joy. And when you look at your sunrises or sunsets and you look across your garden and you see those birds of paradise and you've nurtured them, they bring you joy. There may be people in your community who would never go to take those measures because they look at it, well, you know what, I can just get new plants. It's not important to them. But it's something that is of value to you. And you realize that. And that part of that is part of your authentic self. You love your plants. They make you happy. You want to care for them. And Oprah Winfrey always said, knowing your values and living by them is the only way to live a fulfilling life. And I think that's what you do. You know who you are. When you step out on the golf green, it brings you joy. When you spend time with your dog, it brings you joy. To be able to be a caretaker for your girlfriend when she's going through a recovery process brings you joy. It's part of who you are. That's part of your true north. And there's a lot more to Michael J. Russ than just that. But I think it's a living in alignment with that. And, and sometimes, we bring ourselves back and we go, well, is that really important? Because they change. You don't necessarily, as you evolve, your core values may change. And once you identify them, it's like, okay, this used to be important to me, but it's not so much so. I'd rather spend time with the people that I love than being on the computer watching YouTube videos. And sometimes it takes a health challenge to recognize that. And is spending time in nature is important because it fosters a sense of connection to something larger than yourself, then you need to do that, or whatever it is that makes space for you to reconnect with your own self. I think it's very valuable.
It's interesting that you mentioned that the things. Just this morning, I was standing outside with the five inches of snow just covering the whole golf course and the whole backyard, but the sun came up and it was shining brightly. It was a clear sky, right? So I'm standing on the back step. I let the dog out, the corgi out, and I said, and I was just standing there, and it was probably 20 degrees. But the juxtaposition between it being cold like that and the sun just shining right on me, its warmth, it was so surreal. And seeing the snow,
I bet it was beautiful.
So surreal. Yeah. I took a picture of it because that's what I like to take. I remember it, and sometime down the line I'll take a look at it, and the memories will come back. But just feeling it, standing out on the stoop, and I noticed that my little corgi does that too. Just kind of gets out there every morning, and for a few minutes sits on the step and just looks out into the yard and onto the golf course. And it's really interesting when I catch him doing it, right? And I'm thinking to myself, hey, I like to do that too. I think that's great. I'll come join you, and we'll both look out together. We'll look at what's going on. Now, let me just say one other thing. True North is an individual thing. And in my view, we get into trouble when we attempt to impress our true north on other people, especially people that we love, care for. Maybe it could be your partner, your significant other, your husband, your wife, whatever, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever you want to call it. It's important to not feel as though you have to impress upon them what is true north for you, because that's the beauty of it. It's what grounds you. It's what brings you back home. And to them, they need to figure out on their own what that is. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you agree with me, but I bring that up because
right.
all the things that do true north for me, my girlfriend doesn't do. But I don't try to force it on her, And there's certain things I love to do, and watching the sunrise or watching the sunset, or seeing that time when the sun is shining right between the trees and the rays are coming out, that you can see the rays of light. Just like, it's phenomenal to me. It just lets you know, hey, in the right spot. I'm here. I'm in the right spot. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be because I'm experiencing this joy from that happening. And when you try to attempt to force it on somebody else, it can be problematic.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I think your true north is different than anybody else's true north. It's going to be different. And I think Shaman Durek says that where people lose themselves in a relationship, and you're so busy
being
making the other person happy that you lose sight of what's important to you. And so when we can bring ourselves back to our true north, even when life feels overwhelming, if we return to our values, what makes us happy, our passions, and what really truly matters to us, that helps strengthen those relationships that you're in. And when you live by your own values, I think through the law of attraction, you tend to start attracting more people who share in your vision and support your higher purpose. And those are really the values that keep us stable and clear, and regardless of whatever external circumstances may be unfolding. And so, you bring yourself back, and some people call that true north center. Bring yourself back to the center, centering yourself, grounding yourself. Whatever languaging you take, it just so happened that True North came out of my dream, and I thought, geez, that sounds like a fun topic to explore. So I'm grateful to you, Michael, for playing in this True North realm with me. It's
I've
wonderful.
always known what mine is. I think it's always fun to reflect back on how my True North, where it kind of like began, and where I had a sense of right and wrong. I grew up at 12 years old. I was playing in bands, and those bands, other members are drinking beer and hanging out, and I didn't do any of that. And I used to get ridiculed because I didn't do any of it. And I've been around guys in Hawaii and lived with guys that were, every time you turn around, they were smoking pot during the day, snorting coke at night, staying up till 4 a.m. or 5 or 6, and they were incredibly intimidated when I said I wanted nothing to do with any of that in a very friendly, smiling way. They were like, what? And it's interesting because I knew at that particular point when they got upset at me because I wouldn't do what I wouldn't partake of their own vices, it's because I understood why they did what they did, and I didn't need that. I had that inner strength, and I forgot what age I was. I think it was 20 years old, and I had that experience, and I'm just laughing. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I could see their insecurities. I could see that they didn't have a true north, that they were kind of flying by the seat of their pants without thinking about what they were doing, and they didn't like what they were doing, and they were attempting every night and during the day to change their state of being. And I liked mine. I loved it. I loved Hawaii. Loved the weather, loved the people, loved everything, and that's what I got involved in during the day. But I learned early on not to succumb to peer pressure, to stay strong with my true north, what I thought was right for me. I stayed in alignment with my true north, and when those situations came up, and that wasn't the only time they've happened several other times since, I just said, no need. Don't need to do that. And, you do what you want. I know what I want to do. And that's not it, right? Not because it's, you got to try this, it's fun. No. It's like, I don't need that. My true north, I could go out and have a conversation with somebody for 2 or 3 hours. It's incredibly interesting. I could have a wonderful conversation with somebody and get the same feeling when I get to know somebody.
So true.
You can get that same exact feeling. And we've all stayed out. I know you have. Don't sit there. You can't deny this, that you've met a guy and you've stayed out. You've talked to them for hours about all kinds of things. And
absolutely,
the joy that's come from that, staying up all night talking about what you have in common and what you've done and things that happen and anecdotes and all these. It's just like the most fun thing in the world. You just don't want it to stop, which is why the sun rises when you're still talking. It is amazing. We've been there, and it's a joyous moment a joyous moment to be alive. It really, really is. So,
true.
Knowing your true north can keep you on your path and keep you out of trouble, keep you out of doing things, keep you from stepping so far out of alignment that you find it challenging to get back.
Yes, very true. And I think, Michael, this year is a very special time. We've talked about it being number 9, being the year of completion. And there's lots of different timelines that we can choose. And I look at right now we're on the precipice. There's 6 planets that are in alignment, and Mars, when it stops being out of retrograde, it'll be in alignment too. There'll be 7 planets in alignment. And I think, okay, completion, bringing these things into alignment. Again, it brings me back to true north. True north, like it's aligning. What brings you joy? What is meaningful? What's peaceful? And even in the midst of lots of different uncertainties, you bring yourself back to that place, and it's absolute flow and harmony and love, that connection and that connection to love.
Yeah.
It's
loving yourself
fantastic.
and loving life and loving others. And loving others enough to let them be who they are, instead of trying to change them, which takes you away from true north when you do that. Your own true north. It's not it's not in the cards, but it's fantastic. I want to take a moment before we get through here to make sure that our listeners on PRN-FM here know that we have a podcast of this episode. If you're a new listener, connect to the number 2, love, L-O-V-E, connect to love, and you can pick it up on Spotify and Audible and Apple Podcasts and probably Google as well, anywhere your podcast is distributed. We've been doing this now, how long? For like 4 years almost?
Yes.
It's been, and time flies when you're having fun. However, thank you for sharing this podcast with somebody that you know, sharing it with a friend, Much appreciated. I'm so grateful to be here with you, Lisa, and to be able to converse once a week and let my mind just open up and things to flow out. You do that for me, and I'm so grateful. So grateful.
Oh, likewise, and I'm grateful to each one of you who take the time to listen to us. It's truly, truly, truly a blessing, and we're looking forward to what is next unfolding for both Michael and I on our journey, and looking forward to hearing what inspires you and what your true north is. So until next time,
bye-bye.
Peace out.